We've been talking a lot about arts journalism, and everybody's been talking about new ways to do it, but I really thought a good way to open this discussion would be to talk about what it is. What is arts journalism? What is criticism? And then to move on to how these new forms, are they changing the definition? Should we change the definition? What is arts journalism?
I feel like a little bit like Anna Wintour when someone asks her, what is style? What is fashion? And she always brushes them off. I'll try to be a little bit more personable than that. I think that, the way we think about journalism at the Times, I don't think we really make a big distinction between arts journalism and entertainment or media. I don't think we really try to build these walls between the nonprofit sorts of entertainment and the stuff that tries to make money. I think what we really try to do is use culture, use entertainment, and use media as a lens to really write about what's going on in the world generally, and not only about the product, but really what it says about not only the people who create it, but the people who consume it as well and how they consume it, and really try to put these products in a broader context, societally and culturally, so you're not just writing about the artifact itself, but really trying to explain its relevance in a broader context to people, and not only the things that they know they're interested in, but the things that they might not have heard about before,
right.
And really try to bring those items to the fore.
Right, so one of the things I enjoy about reading your pieces, in fact, is you're talking about video games. You're not just offering me a review, you're talking about what does this mean? Or you're giving it, how does it fit into some wider context? So that even if I'm not interested in video games, I might in fact read your piece.
I think that's a really important part of criticism is even people who aren't specifically interested in that particular thing, they want to know about what's going on in the culture broadly. The analogy that I use sometimes is we'll do a review of a hip-hop concert or a 50 Cent concert, for instance, or something like that. And even readers who aren't going to go to a 50 Cent concert, who want to know what's going on in the world around them, will read that, and a critic can really be that lens, can really provide that insight into something that you might not go out and spend your money on, but as someone who is interested in the broader world around you, you can learn about music or art or video game, right, or a museum exhibition, and really sort of use that to broaden your overall understanding of what's going on in the world around you.
Jeff?
Yeah, I definitely kind of agree with that, but I sort of also see it a little bit differently. I think that a lot of the role of the critic is to kind of push back as well at the piece of art, and in that way maybe get to a work of art themselves. And in that sense, what we're really doing is expanding the body of cultural knowledge. Because what we do really in our work is to produce and to reproduce cultural knowledge. And I think if you look at it in the broad sense, then we're really creating a lot of the ideas that the country, that the world, that our local communities are organizing themselves around in a lot of respects.
Right. I sometimes think of it as making order out of chaos, and certainly with the web the way it is, I feel like there's a place for that. So the thing is that now there are a lot of tools. There's not just text, and there's no doubt we're moving into this multimedia world, and so many of these really interesting experiments we saw trying to use these tools. What have you seen, either of you seen, out there where you actually thought, wow, that's really interesting. They're using these tools, and it is in some way reaching this definition that we've just set out.
My favorite website by far right now is, I just lose hours on this, is a site called City of Memory. And it's put together by a community organization in New York City called City Lore. And what it does is it provides you with a map of the 5 boroughs, and there's points that'll be blinking on this. You go and click on a point, and a story will pop up. It'll be video, and there'll be text underneath it and that kind of thing. But it's all contextualized because it's set in this particular neighborhood. There's an actual point on a map that you're talking about. And people have strung these different points together and created tours around this, virtual tours around this type of stuff. And the reason it's cultural knowledge is you go to the website right now, for instance, and you can look at a tour of music and record shops. So it'll include a story about Manny's Music, which was central to the jazz music scene during the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And then you can go to a story about a record store in Queens, and I think it's in Queens, and hear this person's story about the 1977 blackout and how that affected the neighborhood. So you're getting music, you're getting art, you're getting context, you're getting history, And you can add your own stories. People from the neighborhoods are adding their own stories to this. So this is a website that is taking on its own kind of life.
Well, one of the things I thought that was interesting, you showed me that site earlier, is that the parts that were actually done by City Lore have one color. The parts that are contributed from other people have a different color. And one of the things I thought seemed important about that is that people could discern what had been done by somebody who might be an expert, or, on things versus something that was done by somebody who was just a neighborhood person who wasn't maybe being as careful about facts.
Although the thing there I would kind of say is that, again, this is kind of about cultural knowledge. So at the end of the day, journalists, neighborhood experts, griots in their neighborhoods, that kind of thing, we're all doing the same job, is what I'm trying to say. And so the distinction is important because I think that it shows you the curated tours versus the stuff that's just kind of popped up.
Right.
But I think that the kind of expertise type of role that journalists have played in the past, that the genie's been let out of the bottle by technology by now.
Yeah,
and that our roles have changed, and we have to kind of come to grips with that in a way.
I don't think the distinction is really between experts and non-experts. That's artificial. I mean, who's to say who's an expert and who's not? I mean, that sort of ivory tower gatekeeper function, I think, is coming down.
Yeah.
But what is important to maintain is this understanding of who has an entrenched interest in what they're writing about and is financially independent.
That's a good point. Yep, that's
I mean, and so you have to know where the person's coming from, at least. And you can take that with however many grains of salt you feel is appropriate. But it's important to know sort of what the person's background is and where they're coming from. I think some of the comments that we saw, I love the Indianapolis Museum of Art presentation just now, but one of the questions obviously is, well, if the people are actually paying the people who are writing about them, then how objective can they really be?
Right.
You're seeing this with sports teams as well, starting to hire their own beat reporters. But going back to this question of different types of form and the importance of text, and I really loved the Sophie presentation, and the NPR music stuff is also fabulous. But I think the idea is, what we're in the business of communicating aren't necessarily words. We're in the business of communicating ideas. And ideas can obviously be communicated in many different forms. And having, the Indianapolis guy was saying, I think video is the best way to experience art short of actually being there.
Right.
And there's something to that. But I do think in the communication of ideas, complex or simple, we still haven't really gotten past the written or spoken word as the way to formulate and convey, especially complex ideas that can't necessarily be reduced to the 160 characters of a tweet. And so we can use the other elements of video and visual elements to show what we're talking about. But I don't think there's been any dissolution or any removal of the importance of the written word. And what we're seeing, it's so funny, I've been on computers since the 80s, since I was a kid. And I remember the older folks saying, these computers are going to make everyone illiterate. They're not going to be able to, and the exact opposite has happened, where more people are reading and writing now than ever. It's on a screen sometimes rather than on a printed piece of paper, but that's not, that distinction doesn't really matter. And I think what we've seen is, trying to use these other elements to show what we're talking about, but this idea of critical thinking expressed through the written word, I don't think is going anywhere.
Well, it does seem like we can put more complicated ideas. You cover video games, and it seems to me that possibility of interactivity that video games are presenting, and you and I were talking earlier about how many great writers are going into it. So I do wonder if there isn't a possibility for a kind of interactivity.
Well, absolutely. Video games, I love what I do, and I think video games are the most important new form of entertainment precisely because video games are the one area where you're starting to see this element of interactivity and the player or the user being able to direct their entertainment experience. You see it more purely in games than anywhere else. And you see other media playing catch-up, whether it's something like American Idol. And the reason that program has been so successful is it's not, you think of television as the least interactive medium. And what has American Idol done? They've included the audience in participating in forming the storyline. And we're seeing that whether it's on the web or cell phones, whatever it is, people want to be engaged in participating in their entertainment experience. And video games are a very pure form of that, where it really is completely user-driven, where there are bounds. But it's all about the decisions that you make and about what I have done rather than sort of passively observing what some other protagonist is doing.